and those restrictions, as I said, will be from 11 AM to 3 PM. But if you're driving to Regent's Park, whether it's the university, the mosque, just to the park, you'll still be able to drive there. And there's been a lot of misrepresentation about this. Regent's Park is not going to be closed forever to cars. Whatever you think of that, you know, you'd like it closed to cars permanently or whatever, you'll still be able to drive here if you need to. For example, if you have kids or you know, come from a long way or are disabled, etc., you'll still have access to the park. Now I'm heading over Macclesfield Bridge. Left, slowing down for the stop. Go. Now what some people, I'm going a bit slower than I normally do just to be able to talk to you. Now what some people believe is that Regent's Park will become a velodrome. Now it's already used, as you can see, by a lot of recreational cyclists. They have done a lot of work, Regent's Park cyclists, other clubs like Islington cyclists, to make sure, for example, that the incidences of red light jumping are decreased, that cyclists ride with consideration for pedestrians at the crossings, or if you're at the light crossings, or if you're crossing here as well. And the idea being, obviously, to curtail some of the myths about cyclists. One of the other myths about cyclists is that, yeah, in the park they ride fast. The limit is 30 miles an hour for all traffic in Regent's Park. Now, to put that into perspective, a lot of these cyclists are not going to be, you know, they're not going to be doing that in this park. To give an example, when Bradley Wiggins broke the 1 hour world record, his average speed was about 34 miles an hour. And that was in a velodrome under race conditions and a very light track bike. It's very different to these bikes over here that you see. Now, why is Regent's Park to be closed? Because as part of the CS11 programme, there will be a lot more cyclists coming to Regent's Park. You're not going to be encouraged as a cyclist to go down the Finchley Road, head down southbound. You're going to be encouraged to go through Regent's Park, and the quid pro quo is it becomes less quiet, it becomes more quieter and more safer for you as a cyclist. That's why they are putting these restrictions on the gates, on 4 of the 8 gates through Regent's Park, to prevent rat running, so that cyclists have a more safer environment. And it's not just sports cyclists. Yeah, you'll be getting lots more commuter cyclists through here. Just like this guy crosses from the zoo. Green. So, yeah, to clear up the misnomer, Cycle Superhighway 11 is not to create a velodrome in Regent's Park for sports cyclists to whiz around at 50 miles an hour. The reason we are closing some of the gates of the park and putting these restrictions is because all the commuter cyclists, the recreational cyclists, you know, the ones who just want to poodle, which is just pedal slowly like this through the park, get a safe environment away from rat running motor traffic. And so, for example, you know, there are no speed cameras and there are no speed signs in Regent's Park, but it's factual that the limit is 30 here, whereas in Richmond Park, the other Royal Park, one of the other Royal Parks popular with cyclists, it's 20. Yeah, it's a nice stretch of road if you're going through Regent's Park in the morning. Yeah, it's one of the luckier things about commuting through it. Crossing. Now, you can see some of the gates there. I can't twist because the camera's on a chest strap. But I'll talk about the controversy later, because at 4 of the 8 gates there are going to be these raised junctions. Now, what are raised junctions? You think of them as just humps like you get on residential roads, yeah? These are going to be a bit different. The idea is that there's a lot of stakeholders in CS11, as there are in any project, and CS11 you've got TfL, obviously, you've got Camden Council, you've got Westminster Council, and you've got the Royal Parks, which is also effectively an executive agency of the government. It's got nothing so much to do with the monarchy, it's just on former royal land. Now, the Royal Parks, as part of the giving the permission for CS11 to go through the park, I believe are pushing for these raised junctions in the park, partly to reduce speeds for what motor traffic will come through here as a destination. That's the aim, they say, as well. Now, one of the controversies about these raised junctions is they're actually going to be, without seeing the full precise measurements, I can say they're actually going to take up a fair amount of space. It's not like your little road hump like that. You go onto a raised junction, slow down, which will slow you down, and then you go off. Now, why are these raised junctions important? Well, part of it is they want to keep in character of the park, and I will show you this later, is as we head towards what they will look like, is that they will be covered with these cobblestones to keep in character of the park. Now, cobblestones are disliked obviously by cyclists, but also if you're a pushchair user, if you're a wheelchair user, if you are partially sighted and navigating with your walking cane, for example, as well, because cobbles you can feel, for example, if you're partially sighted, but you can't necessarily see, and these cobbles will end up with gaps in them. They cost money to maintain, and if you're a cyclist, they can be slippery in the wet. Now you can see it's wet when I'm filming here. It's not, they're not going to be majorly slippery like this, but even if you're going at slow speeds, you might well slip off or sink in between the gaps if the maintenance does not is not there. So that's why a lot of cyclists do not like the idea of the raised junctions and the cobbles, not because it's going to slow them down, or stop them doing fast laps. It's because it is a safety issue, not just for cyclists, but for other stakeholders and users of the park. Now, as I head towards Park Crescent, I'll show you roughly what I mean by the controversy of these cobbles. And as we cross into Park Square, slow down a bit. There's going to be a raised junction just further south of here, but it's going to go from here, effectively, think of it like that, so you, and then you're there. So it's actually going to be quite big. It's not going to be like this hump you see here. I'm just going to dismount, go to the pavement to give you an idea of what these cobbles are. Obviously, if you're a resident in one of the lovely flats here, you'll still be allowed to park in Regents as a destination. So, these, if I point the GoPro down, check this for me. If I point the GoPro down, these are what I mean by cobbles. As you can see, what has been some minor rain, if it's really raining, they become slippery. They're individually filled in with, I presume, concrete as well. And why, as a cyclist, do I not like this, or if I'm partially sighted? Well, look, it's not really level, is it? If I put my wheel down, it's just sinking in between the cracks. It's not so much uncomfortless. And if I'm riding at speed, I don't dismount, but I get out off the saddle, go over it, don't feel so much. But if I'm in a wheelchair, you have to push more. If you're a wheelchair cyclist, and there are a few who use Regents Park for training as well, these raised platforms are not good for you. So if you're pushing a pushchair, because as well it's important, because the raised platforms are going to be at crossing points in for 4 of the 8 gates, i.e. at junctions. So you'll be wheeling your pushchair over these as well. So that's why a lot of people are opposed to cobbles. I realise the world parks want to keep the heritage of the park, but I believe such cobbles like this, CS11, which I point down again, are a mistake. Now CS11 crosses the Marylebone Road here, one of the main arteries into that goes east to west across London, going all the way into the city. And the idea of CS11 is we go around Regents Crescent into Portland Place and link up to the Central London grid. Now I won't talk about the Central London grid right now because I've got to get to work, but let's just go through this first. I'm going to dismount here and talk about Portland Place. So, as I get off, we're in a crescent here. Crescent obviously goes round, goes through these parks, these gardens here for the residents. Now, as you can see, there are parking spaces on either side of the road, and you've got the junction there. What CS11 will do is, firstly, you'll have a cycle box at the junction, great, and then you'll have what they call advisory cycle lanes on either side of the road. On the on the right of the cars. Now there are two options for this, A and B, and I know that some people won't like the idea of cycle lanes just to the right of cars because of the risk of maybe hitting a door, but the idea is to create a bit more space for cycling in a very constricted environment as you head into the park. And yeah, it might be better than it is now if you get into an awkward position up there at the junction. You want to go straight, but can't because there's two lanes and sometimes you get squeezed out. Turn there and film. I'm going to walk along the pavement here because CS11 goes around here. Yeah, it goes around here, around these houses, offices, etc. On this crescent, on these advisory cycle lanes, which they plan to build, and in towards Portland Place, which you can see is in the central congestion charging zone.